how does someone prepare themselves for success to keep their self-confidence and expand it, not dim their light?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing that ultimately worked for me is to just kind of maintain that bottom of the mountain mindset. In a lot of ways, there's like a famous cliche about, you get to the top of the mountain, you realize there's a taller mountain behind it, and so it's like figuring out what that taller mountain is, right? And a lot of times you just invent it. Like you just pick something out of thin air. You're like, you know what? Like I'll make this my mountain, right?
Yeah.
And it's finding that so that you can, because there's a certain amount of freedom and maneuverability that comes with seeing yourself as a beginner, seeing yourself as somebody who like doesn't have anything to lose or doesn't have all the answers. And for me, it's been psychologically very, very beneficial to find a way to keep that and not put all of my identity and self-worth into that, because if I did that, then I'd be terrified to get out of bed in the morning, right?
So when you were saying that, for those just listening, you're pointing at the book,
Yeah.
putting your self-worth and identity into the success of the book.
Yes.
Right? What should we put our identity and self-worth into if it's not into our accomplishments, our career, or our wealth?
Yeah. It's a great question. I personally believe that you should treat your identity or your self-worth the same way you treat a good investment portfolio, which is you diversify it across a lot of things that are not correlated to one another. So the same way, you want to split up your money between stocks and bonds and cash and real estate, because those things don't always move in the same direction at the same time. You want to put your self-esteem in things that aren't going to go north or south at the same time.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for someone listening or watching, what does that look like in a day-to-day life?
So for me, those categories, I do think it's very important. Like you should have a lot of your self-esteem tied up in your career and accomplishments. I think that's healthy. That's good.
Like your skill sets, the things you're learning and developing, and the impact you're making.
You spend half your waking hours working on something. So you should care about that something, and you should take some amount of pride in it. Like I think that's healthy. But, with that, I would put relationships, both family and friendships. I would put knowledge, learning something, having some sort of hobby or interest that you do simply for the sake of doing it. And I think I would throw in there as well, I think for a lot of people, you might throw religion or a spiritual practice in there. For me personally, I'm not very spiritual or religious. I just kind of see it as like charity or generosity. It's like do good things for people.
Being generous human being. And that doesn't mean you have to give all of your time, but just being kind to people.
Yeah.
Opening the door, being courteous, being appreciative.
Or, volunteering, helping somebody out, whatever.
I'll speak from personal experience here. Whenever I was in challenging intimate relationships, it didn't matter how successful my business or how talented I was as an athlete. I always felt like my self-worth was a lot lower if my intimate relationship wasn't successful, or if it was up and down and emotionally challenging too much.
Sure.
How much do you think our intimate relationship, and I don't know if that's just me, that I was just really bad at them, but how much do you think our intimate relationship is tied to our self-worth? Like if we are struggling in intimacy, do you think we can still have confidence and full richness of life in other areas? Or does that hold us back a little bit?
It's funny because I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, where people tend to struggle in their intimate relationships because they don't have a lot of self-worth outside of their intimate relationships, right? Yeah. And so it's one way you solve that is finding self-worth outside of it and like building that identity for yourself. And that tends to help you generate better relationships, which then also give you a lot of self-worth. So it's like, it's interesting. I feel like intimate relationships they drive happiness more than any other thing, more so than career success, more so than money, more so than hobbies or friendships or
Right.
whatever. It's generally like when you look at all the data on happiness, it's how good are your relationships? If they're good, you're probably a happy person, and if they're not good, you're probably not happy. And those two statements are gonna tend to be true
Yeah.
regardless of whatever else is going on in your life. But I think when it comes to self-esteem, self-worth, I do think there's a large component of it does seem to be driven by feeling useful in some way, feeling competent, feeling that you're able to do something in the world.
Yes. Speaking of success, I always forget the exact quote, but I love the message that Jim Carrey shared in one of his commencement speeches where he says, I wish everyone could become rich and famous and realize it's not the key to happiness, or something like
Sure.
that. Do you feel like success adds to happiness or adds to feeling not enough still? Do you feel like it supports you more in being happier, or makes you realize, oh, I'm actually deficient in other areas?
I don't think success and money buys happiness. I think but it can buy away unhappiness. So it can buy away problems that would normally derail other people.
Right.
So the stress of not knowing if you're going to be able to buy books for your kid,
Right.
or if you're going to be able to meet rent next month, it buys away those things. It buys away a lot of stress and angst. But I think if you are psychologically wounded and fundamentally have a low self-esteem or struggle with self-worth issues, it's not going to solve those for you on its own. And in fact, there's plenty of examples of people who, get super famous and rich, and it's not enough.
Yeah.
I think you also want a little bit of diversity of values within the relationship. You want to have different standards for different things and different opinions about different issues. It just makes life way more interesting. There's probably a threshold or a breaking point somewhere, right? And it's, one of the examples I've used in a book